Thank you for the opportunity to share with the broader Informa community insights and key learnings on how to build fun through virtual and hybrid events. I believe it's a great opportunity for events organizers like you and agencies like us to co-create our future and to create the future of industry. Building fans, creating emotional connection with your brand, transforming your attendees into ambassadors was important in the physical world, but it's becoming a critical path to audience engagement in a virtual environment. And to share some insights on those engagement, I'd like to have Avinash coming and join me, calling from Hong Kong. Avinash, hello.
Hi, Laurence. Hello, Laurence. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Good, good. It's a pleasure actually to join all of you today from Hong Kong. It's quite late night here. It's actually just gone midnight, but it's great to be with you with the power of technology that we have, which is what we're talking about here as well. And so why don't we just get started? Why don't we get started with a question? This is your first question in Slido.com. So here it is. How do you feel about the future of our industry? How do you feel about the future of our industry? So go to Slido.com, and actually in the polls section, you have a chance to type in just one word. So what's that feeling like that you have right now about the future of our industry? So while you're doing that, if you're just figuring it out Slido a little bit there, if you're just connecting, and I'm sure those words will come in. You know, personally, myself, yeah, I think, of course, there's a level of anxiety, you know, times of change. And of course, with change, you know, things can be a bit tricky. But in general, I would say there's a tremendous amount, at least in my mind, personally, of optimism in terms of the opportunities that lie ahead, especially when we think about all of those things we can achieve when it comes to moving to, for example, the virtual world. What about yourself, Laurence, actually? How are you feeling about everything and the future of the industry?
Yeah, I think I'm feeling kind of, some of you are already answering it, excited. Excitement is coming up, excited, uncertain, generally optimistic. So I think I felt a mix of excitement and uncertainty. You know, this is things that are happening that we don't control. We went through a phase at cancellation. It was difficult, challenging. We see intrigued, great, apprehensive, innovative, uneasy. It's not easy to transform ourselves. Fluid, right. Tired. Oh, we feel that. You feel that being tired, right? So, but the word that is coming up a lot is uncertain, but excited. And I think this is really where we're going. What we see, you know, we deliver a lot of events and we're supporting a lot of our customers and they feel the same way. And we see the future being physical in a way. We believe at MCI that, you know, when people come together, magic happens. So we believe strongly in our heart that emotion goes through physical contact, that events will stay there. But they will be smaller. They will be more targeted, more fragmented. There will be a mix of virtual and hybrid. And the shift in spending is gonna, the spending is gonna shift, you know, more in digital, maybe less in physical. So we have to adapt to that. As a whole, you know, we've seen that the COVID-19 has fueled business and brand leaders to evolve, to transform, and to create compelling options and solutions for the future. But before they do that, they went like us to that anxiety, some of the pain points and challenges they have to overcome. So in this next poll, we'd like to hear about your challenges, your pain points. Can you please pick the 3 top ones for you? You have sponsor engagement, creating virtual trade shows, attendees engagement can be before or during the event, the technology, the platform, the speaker readiness and the ability of the speaker to engage with your audience, and the creation of this human connection in the virtual world. What are those that are becoming more critical for you? What are those keeping you up at night? Okay, Avinash, we have a winner almost. Like 89% of the audience right now is saying creating human connection in a virtual world. Then come the engagement during the event. How do you keep engaged? How do you keep connected to your speaker? How do you keep them connected to us right now? You know, what are the tricks? Do you have anything you can share with us?
Sure. Well, actually, it's not surprising, is it? Actually, when you think about human connections and engagement, that's what you're saying in this particular poll. Not surprising when we think about, you know, creating brand fans. how can you do that if you don't have a certain level of engagement and certainly a certain level of human connection? So through experience, actually, from our side, and certainly the work we've been doing with clients, but also internally in MCI for many, many years, we've really learned a lot from neuroscience, actually, believe it or not, neuroscience principles and adult learning in terms of how you engage and how do you create content that is relevant and personalized and evokes a certain sense of emotion to build that level of engagement and that connection that we were so speaking about, just like you have in your poll and in the results there. So let's think about that a little bit. Remember these moments, those wonderful days, the physical moments, they're coming back, no doubt about it. But ultimately, we also had a challenge, didn't we? In this environment, we also had to engage, but it wasn't easy. And now we're moving over to another sort of world, which is the digital world, the virtual world, which also causes anxiety, no doubt, and uncertainty. But what we also need to avoid is exactly the same kind of thing. You know, making sure engagement is key so that this thing doesn't happen where people are just slouched over their computer. And there is a tremendous amount of challenge here, because if we move from the physical space to cyberspace, it's not a simple cut, copy, and paste. There are similarities, but there are also many differences. So why is it that most online sessions crash and burn? Well, there's several things, actually. One of them, actually, from the physical space is there's less energy, for example, in the online space. You're speaking to a computer, just like I'm doing now from Hong Kong. I don't feel that energy. There's, of course, technology issues by default. That can happen. But also, when you think about content, structure, the way the speakers engage online, that's also a different way of doing it online. And of course, we live in a world of distraction. Consumers right now, all of us as consumers, we consume a lot of content, but they're also distracted in today's world. And that's the example you're seeing right now. You're distracted probably even right now as I'm speaking. And if you think about all of these types of webinars that are happening all the time, look at the research. The maximum attentive score is up to 1/3 for corporate communication webinars. That's not great for ROI. And when we think about that attention span, when anyone is giving a presentation, even online, for example, right now, attention spans diminish very quickly. They go from high right at the beginning, and within 10 minutes, they drop dramatically. In fact, I would argue it's even 3 to 4 minutes attention span in the online space. So speakers really have a challenge on their hands. But the number one challenge in the online space, yes, you've guessed it, is that word engagement, the big E word. How can we increase engagement, therefore, to change potentially behaviors and increase level of loyalty, of course. Now, we can do that in many different ways, but I'm going to share with you 3 tips from neuroscience principles that we've learned. One is about how you structure content and design and flow of your formats, of your presentations. The other is about memory. What do we know about memory? And finally, it's about emotions. So let's look at the first tip on structure. The challenge we have, way too much content, trying to squeeze everything in just like we do in a physical presentation. So therefore, tip number 1, take your content and chunk it down into bite-sized pieces. The research shows doing so by having categories of content in bite-sized pieces, it's much easier for us to retain that and push it into long-term memory. The magic number in terms of cutting content down is 3. Why? Because look at marketeers, communicators, products and brands. Look at this, reduce, reuse, recycle, 3 words. Just do it, Nike, it's burned in our brains. It's 3 words, it's not 4. Now, let me give you an example of this. Take 5 seconds, look at these letters, and then let's see how many you can recall of these 18 letters. Can you recall those letters? Pretty difficult, right? Let's look at those same letters and reverse the order. Now have a look at those letters, and maybe you're seeing a pattern here. Same 18 letters, different pattern. Now let's color code it. All of a sudden, do you see there's a correlation? And now the final one, categorization. Look at this, 18 letters that were jumbled up all of a sudden now make sense. Categories, companies, alphabet, and animals in this case. It's burned in your mind. It's relevant. It's actually retainable. Take a block of content, break it down into 3, beginning, middle, and end. Tell it like a story. So when you have content, 45 to 60 minutes in the physical world, why don't we shift that? The lessons are make it shorter and blend it. Blend it with polls, quizzes, interactions, and reduce it by at least half, maybe even more to keep level of engagement. Memory. What does memory tell us here? Well, we do know actually that we forget very quickly based on the research. In fact, how much do we forget in 24 hours? Surprisingly, 60 to 70% of what we consume as content is forgotten, 60 to 70% forgotten in 24 hours. Shocking. What's the principle here? Space content. Don't cram it all at once. If you space it over a period of time and create more of an event, not just a one-time session, it's more likely to retain in long-term memory and be easily recalled. So create a virtual event, space it over time, different modalities, repurpose content, and space it into micro content even after the event is over. That is extremely powerful, and that's a form of design. And that's a way also that we can increase the actual retention of knowledge and content, which is extremely important. Otherwise, what's the point in the first place? Spacing is extremely important as a principle. And finally, emotions. One of the toughest ones in the virtual world, I'm sure. But can we do something about it? Yes, we can. Emotion trumps rational thinking. That's how you choose your partner, your husband, your wife, the person you vote for, the party. It's all about emotion. Then you rationalize with cognitive thinking. How can we put emotion into the online space? Well, it's all about what happens in the brain. Right in the limbic system, a lot of chemicals produced. Dopamine, this is exactly what happens, right? When we get hooked, for example, on Facebook or Twitter, with the likes and the shares, that's a dopamine rush. How do we create that in the online space? Create multi-sensory experiences. Use more than one sense. Try to use 2 or 3 senses. Believe it or not, how can you do that with content? Tell stories. We've all heard of that before, but stories are evoking emotion for sure. Powerful visuals that support your content really evoke that emotion. And finally, believe it or not, the sense of smell. Even taste, but smell is one of the most potent ways for us to influence emotion, because smells go straight to the limbic system and really release those neurochemicals. Now that may sound challenging, but believe it or not, if you're creative, you can evoke smells. And there are many different examples of that. This is that 3-course menu, 3 different ideas from neuroscience principles. And actually, Laurence, I'm sure we have some client examples, right, where we actually took the pains and we found solutions. Maybe you can share some of those, Laurence.
Yeah, definitely. And some of the examples that we have into building this kind of audience connection and engagement, we were able with our client to use creativity and the 5 senses into surrounding, in a way, the audience into an experience. So, for example, we used challenges during an event. So the speaker will ask you to answer some questions. At the end, you may have a prize. We also used a mix of physical and virtual. So bringing to you a top VIP or your key speaker or key audience a cup of coffee or a box with a nice bottle of wine that they could share at the social event. So it's really how you're merging the physical and the virtual, and having them connecting in a different ways. We also encourage our client to build communities before they get to the event. By building communities of interest, having people connecting an online platform, sharing stories, building up content, then they are more inclined to come to your event and to share those stories again. They are becoming kind of a true actor of what your event is going to become. And then that's also a way to keep them together after the event. So very, very important into bridging those communities together. It's also very important that you understand that the people you're going to have in front of you in this virtual world may be completely virtual enthusiasts, and they may just be, they love it, they've been used to it, they're geeks, So it's going to be easy to convince them, both from a sponsor standpoint or an attendees. But they may be very skeptic, they may not like it, they may not be engaging with it. So you have to really phase into your audience and build the right journey for them. So in those examples, we are creating kind of a tips for you. What are the tips that we will recommend that you consider when you build your event? The first tip, which is a tip that is for us as well, Avinash, is that we all have, as an industry, we need upscaling and rescaling. We need to learn new things. We need to try, experiment, fail maybe together, but as an industry, we've been kind of lazy and using the same kind of old recipe. But we need to upscale all that and learn the new world of tomorrow. Second tip, focus on your key assets. As a company, as an organization, as an event, you have things that are unique. Content, relationship, experience, a marketplace, build up on that. That's what makes you unique. Don't try to cover it all, especially in this virtual world. It doesn't work. It's not really, and then build those journeys, as I said, the journey of your customer, attendees, the stakeholders as well, the sponsors, the speakers, get them training, make them feel comfortable into engaging with your audience. It's not an easy task to be talking to a camera. Trust me, I'm right there. At the end, keep it simple. If you don't overcomplicate things and over-delivered, you need to give value to what you're delivering. So don't, it's very, very difficult, but you have to over-deliver, which poses another question on the business model, but that's a very important piece. For us, what's important as we're working with our client, it's all about creating what we call a O2O2O strategy, online to offline, back to online. How do you build that kind of cascade down into creating engagement before, during, and after in the virtual and in the physical world? But one of the key points, one of the best practices that we have, and we're showing that today, hopefully, is about staging and content delivery. Our content may be great, it may be not well staged. You may not listen to me right now, but if you want to, build up that story, staging and content delivery is very important. And for that, I'd like to take you backstage and welcome Simon to the call.
Thank you, Laurence. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining. My name is Simon Tomei. I'm an account director at Dorier Group. I'm here a little bit to make you visit our studio. So as you can see, I'm now standing in the control room, which is basically the heart and the core of our studio. And now I'm moving forwards to see what happens downstairs. So I take the opportunity to walk downstairs. As you can see, our studio is built on 2 stories and 2 floors. And this is in order to accommodate different rooms, such as studios and audio studios and post-production studios. But let's get to meet Laurence and follow me. Let's see.
Welcome,
so we're
Simon.
getting into the main studio.
This is typically a studio that we will deliver
Laurence.
up kind of a presentation, and working with our client into transforming their events. So
Hello.
Simon, welcome.
Hello, Laurence. Hello, Avinash.
Hi, Simon.
How are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Hello, everyone.
So Simon is going to stay with us so that he can be there for the question and answer if you have any question around the technical aspect of this webinar. But while we're here still, it's easy. We gave you tips. So it's like, OK, now go deliver your own events. Well, it's not that easy. And we know and we realize it's not that easy. So we've been working with Avinash and our team to build up a methodology, kind of a framework to transform those physical events into true virtual experience. And I'd like Avinash to walk us through the methodology.
Sure. Thank you, Laurence. Yeah, I think what's interesting, we're hearing a lot of people talking about, of course, technology as a primary source of, let's go virtual. What technology do we use? And I think that's one lens to look through, which is about, OK, so is the perspective about just our customer? Is it about technology? Is it about features? Is it about trying to solve today's pain, for example, and looking at digital solutions? Or is there another way? And we believe there is another way. And that other way is really thinking about not just the customer, but the customer's customer. And looking at it through the lens of design, looking at it through the lens of solutions for the digital world, as it were. And looking not at just at digital, but looking at hybrid as the way forward. With that in mind, we really believe there has to be a methodology in place. We need to have a structure, we need to have processes, and we need to be thinking through the lens of user design. So what does that mean? Ultimately, what we're seeing here is we can look at the physical world. All of us have that experience. Of course, in the physical world, there is technology. There's all the things about audio visual, there's the event apps, there's that live engagement with technology in a physical world. We have those components in the physical world that we're all familiar with. Of course, the actual real estate being the venue, the bricks and mortar, the catering, the logistics, the on-site branding. But of course, there's no doubt that we're all missing a little bit of that sort of like human interaction in the physical space, those live experiences, those multi-sensory experiences, and so on. However, what's interesting is that when we really think in terms of the ecosystem of events, we know that now we've moved into the virtual space. And ultimately, of course, by default, we have technology. It's just a different type of technology. Sometimes there's a common denominator, but we also have different types of components. We have now, instead of the real estate being the venue and bricks and mortar, we have screens, digital screens as the actual real estate that we connect with one another. We have those online formats. We have really the focus on content more than anything else online. And ultimately, the power is the value that digital brings. And that's about that reach, that scalability, the data, what you can bring with data. That's also by default. We capture so much more data from the digital experience that we get tremendous insights that we can activate, especially from a marketing angle, for example. And of course, we capture content by default as well, and we can repurpose it. Now, what's interesting is that this is the future ecosystem. This is where we know that things are moving towards becoming hybrid, at least for the midterm. Who knows what's going to happen in terms of how long, but we know that, of course, this is going to remain. Digital will always be there, and it's going to augment that physical experience and really be a hybrid world. But what's fascinating, we believe strongly that there's an intersection between these two worlds, and it's all about the experience that you can create, that engagement and that education. And I think that core word again comes back, you see in the middle, is engagement. Now we look through the lens, of course, of what's most important. And that is the participant, the user, the customer, the employee, whoever is actually attending the event itself in the virtual space. They're engaging in different ways. They're engaging formally and informally, but also socially. So once again, we can see in the physical world, there is formal engagement with workshops and keynotes and breakouts. Of course, there's the social engagement, the gala dinners, the offsite experience, and of course, there's informal engagement with exhibition booths and lounges. But who's to say we can't replicate that, but just in a different way, through another lens? We still have that formal engagement, but now it's about virtual sessions or webinars. And now also social engagement, we have chat rooms, polls and quizzes and gamification. And of course, we have informal engagement as well with case studies, videos, and podcasts, and that whole concept of following through with repurposing content. Ultimately, what we see in physical events is that they are a moment in time. But the power of virtual is all about timeless moments. And this is a powerful ecosystem. This is what we call our engagement spectrum. Now, why are we sharing this with you? Because these are two examples of what we call our DIVE methodology, where we define, ideate, visualize, and engage. We've created a whole set of tools actually around this methodology that really helps us create effective virtual experiences, really looking forward towards the future and seeing how we can activate our clients' and ultimately create that level of engagement, which influences behavior, which influences loyalty, which can, of course, lead to many wonderful things like buying more, spending more, etc., whatever those objectives are and KPIs. So with that said, Laurence, I want to hand it back to you for some final words.
Thank you. What's very important in what you just said, I think, is it's not a consultative approach, but it's really a collaborative approach where we walk through with our client into that map, creating this journey. That's a very different approach of what we've seen in the past, where you will receive a brief and respond to that brief. So we're seeing also a shift into the partnering in the industry. At the conclusion, before we open to the Q&A, just a few words. It's an amazing but challenging time. I think you all agree with us based on what you answer on the questions. You have to balance emotion and cognition. Thank you, Avinash, for the great insight. It's not only about transformation, but long-term vision. We're not transforming a one-shot event. You have to think long-term. We're entering that new area of phygital world. And there is a fusion between the content, the community, and the marketplace. That's, I think, very, very important. And at the end of the day, we all will have to find this balance between your business model and the benefits you're going to bring to your attendees and to your sponsors. So I will leave you with that thought at the end. Jean-Marc, back to you. Thank you for your time. And we will open the floor to questions.
No, thank you very much, guys, for this very insightful and actionable presentation. So I really enjoyed it, and I hope that our audience too. I would like to kickstart the Q&A with one question and leverage actually your experience, not the good one, but the bad one. So I was wondering if you could share any failures that you have experienced in pivoting events to digital. What went wrong and why?
Okay. Good question. I think there's a couple of different levels into the failure. You can have technical failure, with Simon can talk about that, which happens. We're in a world where we're live, anything can happen. And then there is also kind of the wrong model. And I think as the industry has been experimenting, there was a lot of try and testing and then not doing the right things at the right time with the right people. But let's talk about the technical. Maybe you give an example and I give another one.
Oh, there are many technical things that can happen. One key word I would say to arrange this and to have always to get ready now to this kind of event is having always a plan B, always a backup plan. And this is what we encourage our clients to do also when they're doing the agenda, probably during the agenda to find out a way to spot in that a little backup plan, because the thing that actually today, when we're doing virtual events, we can't control is what we call it the last mile. And what is the last mile? It's the last sections that links us to the speakers who are remote. So we have no control on what happens. We have no control, in instance, for Jean-Marc at your house, what happens on your connectivity. Yeah, exactly, on your end. So we don't know what happens. Suddenly we lost connection and we cannot fix it. But if this is something that was studied at the beginning and was foreseen, of course, we can right away step into another discussion, or maybe change it, or step into a Q&A session while we're fixing the issue. This is one of the things, and it happened most of the time. This is the issue. The other one is we experienced that when we were connecting Brazil with. We were doing many big events, connecting meetings rooms with 400 people in Japan, 400 people in Brazil, and there was a huge storm that came, and everything just went down. I mean, the antenna, all the interactivity, and all the connectivity went out. We lost the internet connection. But it was a panel discussion. So basically it was 4 people and we lost 1. So the other 3 could go on doing the panel discussion, fortunately. So these are the kind of issues that can happen. We had backup, exactly. And this is something I encourage to do when you're preparing your event. Always a plan B.
On the agenda side, I have an example of something that didn't go well, where we had a client that really wanted to sell slots to their sponsor, 120-minute slots, because that was their way to make money, So they wanted to say, hey, you have 120-minute slot, and this is you, costume sponsor A, sponsor B, sponsor C. But they never took our advice into you cannot just give them the slot and that's it. And so at the end of the day, the return on investment for those sponsors were really, really low, because they never get guidance, and there was no connection. It felt like a separate event into the event. So that was really something that now we will not let our customer do. On another example, which I thought was interesting in the poll, because you rated it last on the engagement before, how you engage before. So we had a client that had marketing budget to, that they wanted to split before, during, and after social media, all the whole a scheme of marketing budget on how to communicate and engage with their attendees. And they decided that they would split it in 3. 1/3 before, 1/3 during, and 1/3 after. And our recommendation was say, okay, just spend like 80% before, so that you're sure that they come and connect. And then the rest on the day of the event, so they stay there. And don't worry after, because if the content is great and if the attendees are there, they're going to come back. And so they didn't want to do that, and that was kind of a missed opportunity to have more people and get them on site. So that was another kind of failure into that event. So a couple of examples.
No, thank you for your honesty, and it's, I think, really interesting. So we have another question on the chat line from James. Do you have any recommendation on how to build a community before an event? And I think this is something you have touched upon during your presentation. I believe that you could give us a bit more insights around this, because I think it's really critical.
Yeah, so building communities is really part of what we do as an organization. We have a business unit that is called AMC that does that, cater to associations. And so building communities for association is critical, because it's members and how you get those members connected, right? So the tips on the event side is really around content. Content is king. People will come first for content, then they come second for the connection. They come for the interaction. So it's really creating these kind of bubbles on ideation and working group, and using also techniques and artificial intelligence to map some content to people, building up before the event their learning path, if it's about learning path, their experience path is about experience, making sure that they feel connected to your event, like if they were buying a ticket and reserving an hotel room to come to your event. So this is really how you work on both the content, the emotion, the connection, the want to be part of something, feeling to be part of something bigger, right? Avinash, you may have some...
Yeah, I think absolutely, Laurence. And I think one of the things that we've realized, it was quite interesting, Laurence, you said that pre-event was coming lowest, I think, in the poll, which it is a bit surprising, because in essence, once again, if we bring in some adult learning and neuroscience principles, if content is so important and you want to create that engagement within the live experience, one of the best ways you can do that is to prime the brain in the first place with content before people enter any type of experience online, but also in the physical space. That's a common denominator, but most people don't tend to do it. Because if the brain actually is primed to know what's coming, the brain is far more likely then to engage with the live experience. And if you can do that in collaboration with others, people tend to engage more when there's first relevant content in advance of an event, especially if they're able to connect with others, which is about the building community concept. So by doing that, they're far more likely to then get more out of the experience, if it's done well and at quality, of course, in terms of preparing them to then actually have the live experience. And then I think the key part after that is to continue that level of engagement. And digital is the best way. More than ever before, we have so many possibilities of how you can create that online engagement pre, during, and certainly post. Coming back to what I said earlier about spacing content out, repurposing it, which means it's going to basically stick far longer into long-term memory, which I think is fundamental.
An interesting question on Slido. I don't know if you saw that, Jean-Marc, about
no, I didn't see it.
Should we be including a little training for speakers on what to do if they lose connectivity and how to reconnect rapidly? So we're going to share a little thing with you. In the rehearsal just before, like 2 hours ago, we lost Avinash, and I started freaking out. So how did we recover, and what did we do to prepare for this, right?
I don't know, Avinash, you want to give your input? From my side, well, go ahead.
Honestly, is remain calm. As a speaker, if you've actually lost that connection, I've been there. Trust me, I've lost several connections when I've been live online. Try to remain calm. Maybe have a second system around you. For example, a lot of us now, okay, we're fortunate we have maybe a Mac at home or a laptop, have a second system available, but remain calm. Take a deep breath, but also prepare. What I've learned as well is that confidence is not just competence, it's confidence that gets you through some of those biggest challenges. But then also think about, for example, if we lost that connection like we did in our rehearsal, think about having a dialogue between whoever's still online, for example. Think about reflecting on a few questions. Have something as a backup just in case to spark a conversation. So there's many different things you can do, but you have to be prepared for that. Comes back to the plan B.
And then from a technical standpoint, they said you were putting 2 lines just in case. That was
lines are always backup. I mean, internet lines are always backup again. But we are talking in a configuration where we have everyone is remote. You see, because everyone is remote. In that case, we have not a little training, but a big training for the speakers. It's better to have a big one.
Yeah, it's a batch training.
Absolutely. So it's important to let them know what can happen and what should we do in case it happens. And in this case, most of the time when we connect people together, we have always a moderator. And a moderator is aware how to do that, you see. And this is also the good point of having a production company to do this kind of events is because technically we can route up back to until we reach the speaker and see what happens if the issue is from our side or from their side. And in this case, we can get a connectivity to their side via the phone and tell them, yeah, you have some issues with your line. Let's check this and this and that, That's a point that can help to accelerate the process and spot out which was the issue.
And from a speaker training, we have mandatory training of all our speakers, and we advise our customers to do the same. And there is a technical training, so the team will connect with them, check the position, the background, mic. We will send microphone and we'll send whatever we need to key speakers. And there is a specific training, so there's training kit you can send or one-on-one training that we're fortunate enough to have Avinash been training us into all this learning and how to be able to build confidence in front of a camera or in front of people. And so we're doing that with our client as well.
If I can just add to that, Laurence, I think what's interesting is that the speakers that might be excellent in a physical setting, and they've been doing it for years, a lot of those speakers actually are anxious right now, and many of them just cannot adapt. They may try to adapt, and that's great, but a lot of them may have a difficult time. So that training is essential for preparation. But even with that training, if they've been speaking for many years in the physical space, they may not be suited for the online space. So typically those extroverted speakers, they may have a hard time. Introverted speakers, believe it or not, they're the ones that can be extremely strong in the online space. I don't want to try and put people in boxes, but it's quite interesting when you look at it through a different lens.
And just to pick up on what, add a little thing that what Avinash was saying, that in our case, we always do a test with every kind of speaker separately in order to be sure that the connectivity is working, the equipment is good. We also prepare documents, but unfortunately people don't read now. So you can find you can send all the documents that you want that are really well done, and they don't read. So on the day of the test, we start from scratch, and that's the point. But we do it. We do it.
There's another question here on, could you tell us a bit more about how you create emotional connection, or what is the most interesting engagement experiment you've done in virtual event? Maybe, Simon, you can tell us about this, how you mixed the smell sense into a virtual events and how that was done, because that's interesting.
Yeah, I want to learn more.
You want to learn more? Well, it depends on the budget. I can tell you this already, but everything can be done nowadays by mixing technologies, which means that we can always add the visual sense with the smell. Why? Because for one of the clients that we just finished now an event for them for a launch of a product, the idea was to have it an experience climbing a mountain. So we was mainly for the press. So we send at every person a goggle, one of those Oculus goggles, that drops you in an entire 3D environment. And added to this, we found a way basically to have this, when it came up to break, the idea was to break the ice, and in that ice you find a bottle of perfume. And in that specific moment, the idea at the beginning, was to have little caps of smells and perfume here. And then we ask the participants to bring it to their nose and smell it at that point. But this is one of the things that can be done. The other one is the things that you can add 2 little pipes on the goggle that sends you out straight away the perfume. You see, everything can be controlled, of course. It can be done.
But it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be also that big budget that requires a budget, what Simon just described. But it's also about creativity. So when we think about that sense of smell, this is where speakers also in their creativity, if they're smart and they understand that, how can, for example, the attendees, maybe if it's in the morning time, or depending on time zones, if they have a cup of coffee, or maybe the speaker says, why don't you grab something like an orange and scratch it and sniff it? Because that creates a certain sense of emotion or a smell. Smell that coffee. How do you feel when you smell that coffee? But engaging that within the content piece, not just to do it for the sake of doing it, but once again, if you're creative as a facilitator, as a speaker, you can find amazing ways to try and evoke that emotion if you know how to leverage those attendees in terms of their environments where they are, if it's at home, even if it's at the office or somewhere else. So, it's not just about big budgets, it's also about creativity.
Yeah. And this is basically, Jean-Marc, this event was supposed to be face-to-face. So the big challenge for us was to find a way to make it happen virtually. And that was a big challenge. So we had many discussions with the clients. There was a little bit of a good budget, let's say. So we managed to bring them into that dimension, and it was perfect because it happened perfectly. And so this is one of the ways how you can transfer face-to-face into a virtual meeting.
Guys, I just want to thank you so much, because I think we are a bit over, but the conversation was so interesting that I didn't want to stop. So thanks again for your insights and your time with us today. There's a few takeaways I would like to share with the audience today, because first of all, we clearly understood that attendee engagement goes far beyond great content and speaker. I think this is something that Avinash has mentioned many times during the presentation, and I think it requires experienced design and staging. And I really, really enjoy the backstage tour that you gave us today. I think it was very insightful. And this is something that clearly needs to be, replicated. The second thing, it's all about customer and stakeholder journeys. So, technology is always last, not first. It's just an enabler. And finally, I think it's really critical to rethink and transform the way we are engaging with audiences and key stakeholders. So I think you give us a lot of interesting ideas. Now it's time to basically turn these insights into actions. So I want to thank you again on behalf of Informatech for your time and support. I really, really enjoy this presentation.
Well, thank you for having us. And if you have any other questions, please reach out to us. We'll share our contact information with everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you
very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.